So yeah, when you guys are running your numbers, 5% vacancy minimum, 5% property management minimum on the property, and then from there you can find your NOI. But the effects of vacancy, even in the preliminary crunching your numbers, make sure that you include those in your numbers. And obviously, if you do have vacant possession when you're purchasing the property, it's important to let us know, as we spoke about previously, either getting CMHC market rent or finding an alternative solution to be able to move you into that type of financing once you've done all the renovations and your NOI is back to where it should be.
What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video we catch up with the guys from the Findlay Mortgage Team, and we're going to be chatting about NOI and vacancies and their impacts when it comes to trying to finance your next investment property. So a lot of us real estate investors, we often want to get vacant possession of our properties because it really gives us immediate control over the unit. We can go in, we can renovate it, get it up to what we believe to be the highest, best, most efficient use of that unit, and then rent it out for top fair market value. However, there are implications when it comes to actually financing our property as well. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's video. What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and we're back with the Findlay team. Hey, Josh and Erin, how's it going?
Hey.
So I'm really excited. Today we're going to be touching upon multifamily. So this is something that everyone on my YouTube channel wants to learn more about. And oftentimes when an investor's looking to really transition into multifamily, they've probably bought their principal residence. Maybe they've got one small income property, but they often aren't familiar that there is a little bit of a difference, right? And how you're going to approach things. There's implications such as vacancies and things of that nature. So let's really just jump into the multifamily, net operating income, cap rates, all that stuff. Where should we start?
Perfect. Yeah, I think we're just going to start with why we're doing this video. So we're doing this video because we have so many people who are trying to reach out to us about the multifamily space. Some people are maxed out in their personal qualification and they're trying to find a solution where they can still grow in their real estate journey, but they're getting stopped. So the next step in the process is to buy bigger real estate. So how do we go about buying real estate? How do you qualify for real estate? How do we value real estate? All these questions we get on a daily basis. So we thought we'd make a video and share some information with you guys. Specifically, we want to share today NOI and vacancies and how they're going to affect the value of your property and how maybe you can use these parameters to help make some money. So specifically, net operating income. So net operating income is really used just to analyze how much money the property is making. So what we do is when we're qualifying a client, we take a look at, we get the rent roll, we get the expenses, preferably 2 years expenses, and then we'll take an analysis off of what the expenses are and then what the rent roll is currently, and that'll give us like our NOI. That NOI is specific to how we're going to go about trying to find you funding. Specifically, other industries refer to your NOI as like EBITDA, which is like your earnings before interest, taxes, and appreciation. This is a number that is basically your total rent minus all your expenses, not including your mortgage and principal and interest payments. This number is super important for anybody who's looking to get into the multifamily industry. Specifically, the net operating income is important when evaluating the property through an income approach. So a appraiser is going to take a look at the property. They're going to take a look at your NOI and they're going to see exactly how that net operating income is affecting the value of your property. They basically, what they do is they find the operating income and they find the cap rate, and then they use them intertwined together to be able to give you an actual valuation of the property at the time. Now, what's happening is investors are trying to find the best deal possible. So they're going to Windsor, they're going to Sarnia, they're going to, where else are they going to? Windsor, Sarnia, Sudbury, Chatham. Yeah, everywhere. They're going everywhere. And they're basically looking for these undervalued properties, but the net operating income is so low that unfortunately you're either having to scale your down payment to such a high down payment that it's hard for someone to enter the market. So conventional financing is basically out of the question for these types of investors. So what we're trying to do is trying to show that you can actually purchase this property through like private or alternative financing as well as conventional financing, but it really just depends on how much income it's bringing in. Eric can talk about vacancies.
Yeah, and I think just to touch on what Josh was saying there too quickly as well, is one of the things those AAA lenders, whether that's a credit union or just an A bank, they're looking at that debt service coverage ratio as well too. They do want to see that that ratio is up there in around the 1.2, 1.24. So when you send in your current expenses and there are those vacancies in there, they are going to look at that current operating income, and that's going to come into play as well too. So we've had a couple applications where they're, one of the things that all the investors are looking for, like Josh, are those vacant units so they can go in and have some uplift. But when that plays down and reduces your NOI, the A banks take a look at it, and at that current parameters, they don't want to put the lend out on that property. So it does put us into a private solution. Now, when we're talking about the cap rates, the cap rate is going to change per the geography of the area where you're looking in. So the cap rate in Toronto is going to be much different than if you're looking in London, Windsor, Sarnia, Sudbury. So that's something to keep in mind as well too. And then each appraiser is going to use and have their own opinion of what the most effective cap rate is as well. So, there are situations in the past where we've had appraisers give an unfavorable appraisal value and value based off of maybe a cap rate that was a little too high or a little too high in that area. You can have that ability to go out and get a new appraisal done if you think it's not showing the true value of the property. So again, that goes back to the whole appraisals are an opinion of value of that particular person. And if they don't see the market as you see it, there are other appraisers out there that you can use who maybe have the same views on the market as you. So definitely something to think about. Like Josh said, I think he touched on too, there is an equation that we can use to figure out your potential market value of the property. Essentially, you're looking at the net operating income divided by the potential cap rates of that city, and that should give you the estimated market value of what you're looking for. So if you're trying to purchase a multifamily or multi-unit building and you don't really know if you're paying either too high or too low for that, using that net operating income divided by the cap rate, that can give you the estimated market value. And then when it comes to the appraisal, like Josh said, there's going to be two methods that the appraiser is going to use. He's going to use a combination of the direct comparison method and using comparable sales of similar buildings in the area. And he's also going to look at the direct income approach. And then the value that's given on the appraisal is usually somewhere in between, but a little bit more shifted towards the income producing method, as that is the best case scenario for that property. So as you can see there, that's understanding why, if you're picking up a property and there's vacancies in there, having that lower NOI can affect that upfront appraisal value. So, there has been a case actually where the appraisals come in a little bit lower than what the actual purchase price is. Had that deal been at an A lender, the A lender probably would have had some issues with it and either changed the structuring of the loan or potentially walked away from the deal, depending on how far the appraisal and the purchase price was. But we have it at a private lender. The private lender is able to work with it. They're keeping that purchase at 85% of the loan to purchase, so that's great. So they were able to get the deal done and continue to move forward that way.
Yeah. Oh, and I think one thing I'd really just like to build upon for the audience at home in regards to appraisals is really just understanding that they are so subjective and context oriented. So even just for perspective, I'd love to share like an example that we've gone through over the last year. So back in, I think, September or November of 2019, we bought a 17-unit building. And I think we originally bought it for $95,000 a unit. The appraisal came in at $86,000 a unit. It's now a year later, and we've renovated about half of those units. And we recently just got reappraised at $142,000 a unit. Now, I don't think that we actually created that whole $60,000 in lift. I think that they actually underappraised it at the start. But what's really important is understanding what we need in order to like move forward with the deal, right? And I think that that's where having someone that understands the investor's perspective is just so important on your power team, because they'll help you navigate it. In that case, when we originally were a little bit off the mark on our first appraisal when we bought the property, it made more sense to just like, let's close, increase our down payment a little bit, and we'll worry about it and fight on the back end if necessary during the refi.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I think if you have those numbers up front from the seller as well, the NOI, you can basically just create a DSCR sheet and you can tell very quickly if there's lift or if there's an ability for you to actually make that lift or not. If you guys don't have those documents, we'd be happy to either give you those documents or run those numbers for you. But as soon as you have your operating expenses and your liabilities, we can take a look and see if there's even the ability for you to make that lift or not.
Mm-hmm. And appraisers will take into consideration fair market rent values on commercial properties too. So if you guys have a unit where maybe it's a mixed use or whether it's just straight family type living and it's maybe some dorm rooms, some sort of student residence, or maybe it's like some apartments, they will look at CMHCs, figure out what that market rent is in the area, and they will take that into consideration as well too. But as we've talked about before, market rent tends to be typically well below where you'd like that rent to be and may not help as much as what you'd like, but it's obviously going to be better than having no rent coming in and really drastically lowering that NOI.
Yeah, we really see the CMHC data usually lags reality, right, in regards to their fair market value. So I think right now in London, they probably have like a 2-bedroom apartment around $11.50 as the average, where we're renting them for $17.50, right? So again, even though it's better to get some of that lift, like we're really still missing out on a lot of the reality for boots on the ground investors.
Yeah, there's that disconnect between what is actually happening in reality and then what the appraisers are able to use. Now that being said, we actually just ran into an interesting situation where a client is looking to purchase a 17-unit apartment building and they want 5 units vacant when they get it. Well, obviously the NOI on the property is going to be much too low for conventional financing, but they were able to actually find a solution where the lender was able to scale the down payment up to a point where they would only have to put maybe 65% down, and then as soon as they were able to fill the vacancies or do the renos, they were going to basically tranche another 10% to kind of make sure that they had the capital to be able to move forward. So I mean, there are interesting ways to be able to work with financial institutions and banks. That was actually done with a Schedule A bank, which is decently surprising, but they are willing to be able to use part of those rents, and then they maybe want a little bit of verification on the back end now that the work is done, it's completed, that they can move forward and issue the rest of the loan.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I think one thing that helps too, and one of the things that we always ask for is previous financial history statements and previous rent rolls. If we can show that the building has been always tenanted out and has had always high amount of tenants in the building, the banks are going to be able to draw off that and understand that, okay, this is, there isn't a high turnover in this building. Maybe this just happens to be, a poor snapshot of the current time of the building. And going forward, they have, it's a little bit stronger perception that building will have an easier time being tenanted out in the future. So that's part of the reason why we ask for those previous rent rolls as well too, just to show the strength and the attraction of the building and maintaining its tenants. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The effects of vacancy, basically how vacancy is going to work in when we're initially running your numbers. So each bank has their own internal debt service coverage ratio sheet that they use, and they have internal numbers that they use based off of specific geographical areas. Most banks will hypothecate at least 5% vacancy when running your numbers. So if, for example, you guys are running your numbers at home and you want to be accurate, they use at least 5% for property management and 5% for vacancy, even though you might do it by yourself and you might be super effective at it.
Yeah.
They don't care.
I've seen I've seen investors trying to argue till they're blue in the face, right? And be like, no, but you've never seen, I'm so careful, I never have a vacancy. And it's like, they don't care. Because if they have to step in and take over the management of that property, they're not going to be you. They're not going to work as hard as you to get those top rents or to make sure you never have a vacancy or a check never bounces.
Yeah, Susie the teller is not going to maintain the building.
So yeah, when you guys are running your numbers, 5% vacancy minimum, 5% property management minimum on the property, and then from there you can find your NOI. But the effects of vacancy, even in the preliminary crunching your numbers, make sure that you include those in your numbers. And then obviously, if you do have vacant possession when you're purchasing the property, it's important to let us know, as we spoke about previously, either getting CMHC market rent or finding an alternative solution to be able to move you into that type of financing once you've done all the renovations and your NOI is back to where it should be.
Mm-hmm. And when you guys are doing your at-home analysis as well too, make sure that you guys are doing your NOI calculations off of the vacancies and include those. If they're going to be vacant on possession, include those in your expenditure sheets and your financing sheets. Because if the bank looks, if you use your estimated rent for those vacancies and the bank looks at it, and for some reason nobody catches it on the transaction to the banks are going to be doing all their numbers assuming that building is fully tenanted out. Mm-hmm. When they come in and they do the inspection, or the appraiser comes in and does their numbers and they see the vacancies on there, now we run into an issue where the banks are working out here and you guys are really working down here. And if we're, 2-3 weeks into the process, all of a sudden, and the banks say no, now we got to switch gears and try to find an alternate lender who's able to work with that NOI. So make sure you guys are doing your numbers, and the numbers that you send to us include all the vacancies on there.
Segueing into that alternate lender space, there are a few different types of alternate lenders in the multifamily space. There isn't just private. That's just not how it works. So there are institutional private lenders who specifically deal with CMHC on refinance, and there are mom and pop private lenders who will maybe be a little bit more flexible with their terms and conditions. Both of them are decently competitive in the market, just because there is quite a bit of demand in the market currently, and it'd be difficult to be able to create a much larger spread than what there already is. Currently, basically, if you want to have a conversation with your broker and understand the steps you're going to need to take before executing on the purchase, you'll be much better off later down the road. So there's a few different things you should take into consideration. One, CMHC refinancing. Do you understand the equity takeout position and what you're allowed to do with CMHC equity takeouts? And if CMHC isn't the avenue you want to go, mom and pop lenders are a good way to go, because then once you refinance into maybe a credit union or something, you can actually pull equity out and use it to further other investments and projects. But planning out your strategy and maybe the type of rate you want, the type of amortization you want, and what you want to do with that locked up capital before you go ahead and purchase the property is going to be extremely beneficial to you when moving forward and trying to grow your business.
I think one thing to look for, and we're going to have a video coming up on this as well too, is just how much you can save on the upfront capital going with a private MIC versus potentially like an A lender as well too. Most of the A lenders are probably around 75% loan to value, but if you can get into a private MIC and maybe you have some collateral, they'll go 85% loan to purchase on there. So if the numbers make sense with the fees and the purchase price, and maybe you're saving some money up front for renovations, do your numbers and do the due diligence and talk to a mortgage broker. But that may be a better option in some cases than putting a little bit more down and eating some of that capital expenditure, especially if there's going to be a large uplift in that property valuation after the refinance.
So one of the questions we get sometimes is basically, how do I change my NOI? So, you're buying a property. How do I make it so the debt service coverage ratio is going to be where I need it to be able to get out of that private financing solution and into a conventional solution? Well, one way is cash for keys. I know you've spoken about it quite a few times on your channel as well, but you can pay to have people move out, and you can do the cosmetic renovations that are required and then raise the rent and get that lift that way. The second way, which I haven't seen before, but I actually just saw recently, was purchasing a property that is single metered. So if you have like a purpose-built building, but it's single metered, and you're taking on the full liability of the water and the hydro, and you're not passing that on to your tenant. If you got into the property with a significant discount, you'd be able to then individually meter each individual unit, and then from there take the liability off of yourself and put it onto the actual tenants, and in that way being able to raise your NOI and maybe get to where you need to be able to get into conventional financing. And last but not least, just raise the rent in general. If somebody it's an undervalued property and they haven't raised the rent over time, consistently just try to raise the rent. That is a very slow way of doing things, but being consistent with that and making sure that you are signing those forms and making sure that your tenants are paying your estimated amount that you're allowed to raise each month or each year.
Yeah, it's really important. Obviously in 2020 and 2021 with COVID-19 and everything that's going on, we actually don't have those benefits of being able to raise the rent, but under normal market circumstances, it's really important, because that 2% may not be important today, but 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2% over 5 years, all of a sudden, we're now looking at, we would have got more than a 10% lift on our rents because there's compounding on those raises as well. So really important that we're always just focused on the numbers and cents behind our business, because it may not, that $10 a month or $20 a month that you're going to get in new rent maybe isn't going to move the needle for you as an investor, but over time it can have a huge impact on your refinance ability.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today about this specific topic. I know we get a ton of questions about it, so just being able to share that information is going to be super important for you guys as well as the conversation we had today.
Yeah, always appreciate having Josh and Ehren on the channel. I think there was a few subject matters we covered today that I'd love to hear if you guys would like to see us elaborate further. So one I suspect that the audience someday would love is for you guys to maybe walk us through exactly CMHC on these larger multifamilies, what that looks like, because I think a lot of people see it as this silver bullet to success. And I think we know, having spent some time in that space, it's not always exactly what you're hoping it to be as well. I suspect that people would probably love you guys to actually walk through one of those DCR spreadsheets. So if you guys are interested in that, let us know in the comment section down below, and we'll see if we can twist their arms to get a little bit deeper into these subject matters. Thanks again to Josh and Ehren for taking the time to sit down with us and really just explain the implications when it comes to getting a vacant unit on your next rental property. I hope you guys have a better understanding now of how to navigate sometimes these rocky waters when it comes to being a real estate investor. Reminder, if you want to get in contact with Josh or Ehren, we're going to throw a link in the video description down below to all their contact information. Feel free to reach out to the guys, but otherwise, make sure you have this conversation with your mortgage professional before you jump in and go firm on your next deal if you don't already have the financing lined up, and make sure that your financer, that's the mortgage company, is aware of any vacancies that you might be getting at day of possession.